Most of us spend our days moving through a world that demands constant attention. You wake up, check your phone, navigate traffic, field a dozen urgent emails, and by the time you sit down to work, your brain never stops bracing for the next emergency. Biologically, this state is known as chronic sympathetic dominance. It is an evolutionary glitch where your sympathetic nervous system, the network responsible for the fight or flight response, gets stuck in the on position. Our bodies are running on an ancient alarm system built to keep us safe from physical predators. Because that system hasn't updated for the modern world, it misinterprets a crowded inbox or a tense board meeting as a literal saber-toothed tiger. The result is a steady, relentless drip of cortisol and adrenaline. Your body continuously marinates in its own alarm chemicals, trapped in a cycle of defense that rarely allows for actual, deep rest. We end up fighting an invisible, exhausting war with our own nervous system. It drives almost every modern attempt to find some kind of physiological off-switch. The most common response to this stress is meditation, specifically the preliminary stage called dharana, where you try to force the wandering mind to focus on a single object, like the breath. It works a bit like a boomerang. You focus, your mind wanders to dinner plans, and you yank it back, over and over. It takes continuous mental effort to keep throwing that boomerang at the target. But there is a hidden biological trap here. That intense effort to concentrate maintains a subtle warrior stance in the nervous system. The ego is still actively trying to win at relaxing, which means that quiet cortisol drip keeps flowing. Eventually, if you stay with it long enough, the struggle vanishes. In the yogic tradition, this threshold is dhyana. The boomerang has become a hawk riding an invisible thermal updraft. The effort disappears entirely. As long as there is an active you trying to meditate, the body remains subtly braced for impact. True stillness only arrives when the effort stops. Dhyana ignites in the exact second you stop trying. The mind stops wrestling with the object of focus and instead slips into a continuous, frictionless flow of awareness. This document highlights the MRI and fMRI work of neuroscientists like Sarah Lazar and Judson Brewer. They looked at the brains of experienced meditators and found exactly what happens when this shift occurs. In this 3D model, the default mode network's ventromedial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate suddenly go quiet, deactivating the me circuitry. Simultaneously, the insula and anterior cingulate light up in effortless awareness. Finally, the superior parietal lobe dims, dissolving the observer's boundary. Maintaining a constant narrative self requires massive metabolic energy. When these circuits power down, the demand plummets. It is why 40 minutes can feel like 4. The machinery we use to track time and self simply is not running. The brain is only the starting point. This neurological shift immediately cascades down into the body's vascular system. Heart rate variability swings upward. The vagus nerve activates, signaling profound safety. Blood vessels flood with nitric oxide, relaxing the arterial walls, while the steady drip of stress chemicals shuts off completely. This chart tracks specific markers for chronic inflammation in the body, like IL-6 and CRP. When dhyana is reached, these markers drop as though someone turned off a fire hose that had been spraying your arteries for decades. The effects drill all the way down to your DNA. Gene expression shifts. The specific transcription factors that govern how you handle stress rewire themselves to a slower, more resilient rhythm. The body stops fighting a phantom war. Its biological prime directive moves from protect me to the realization that it is no longer separate from the environment it was guarding against. You might recognize some of this. It sounds similar to the flow state athletes and artists describe, where action and awareness merge perfectly. They occupy entirely different habitats. A peak athlete flows within their egoic operating system. They are still identified as the champion or the performer. Contemplative dhyana operates beyond that system, dissolving the observer entirely into the observed. Sustaining this practice leads to permanent anatomical changes. The amygdala, the brain's fear center that swells from chronic stress, physically shrinks. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for complex decision-making and emotional regulation, thickens. The bark of the brain literally grows denser and stronger. This is not a fleeting moment of calm or a temporary escape. The entire endocrine orchestra gets a new conductor, resulting in a permanent architectural rebuild of your resilience to stress. If you try to force this state, you will fail. Striving for dhyana is concentration wearing a different costume. It keeps the ego in charge. Instead, the practice requires resting your gaze on a simple focal point, a stone, the breath, or the tip of your nose. Gently return when the mind wanders, and remain there until the sheer act of returning grows weary. You wait for the moment when the heavy sensation of me concentrating on this object quietly dissolves, leaving nothing but the continuous act of knowing. In that space, notice the exact feeling of your own biology. Pay attention to the texture of a nervous system that has finally stopped mistaking its own storytelling for a saber-toothed tiger. As the war ends, you are left with the only question that matters at this threshold. Who is actually aware of the flow when there is no one left to claim it?